December 4th, 1956. Sun Records, Studio, Memphis, Tennessee. 2. 18 inches the afternoon. The room smells like cigarette smoke and cheap coffee, and something older, the particular tension that fills a space when two very large egos are about to collide. Carl Perkins is in the middle of a recording session. His new single is almost finished. The microphones are still warm. The tape is still rolling, and Jerry Lee Lewis is at the piano. He has been there for 40 minutes. 40 minutes of runs and riffs and boogie-woogie patterns that blur together so fast you can barely follow them. His hands move like they belong to someone else, like they are operating independently of the thin, grinning young man from Faraday, Louisiana, who will tell anyone within earshot that he is the greatest piano player who ever lived. He is 21 years old. He has been playing since he was 9. And he has never, not once in his life, been in a room where someone made him feel like he should slow down, or quiet down, or sit down, until today. Because at 2:23 inches the afternoon, the door to Sun Records opens, and Elvis Presley walks in. He isn't supposed to be here. He has been on the road for months, sold out shows across the South, crowds so large they press against the stage barriers, girls fainting in the front rows, police escorts in and out of every venue. He is 21 years old, and he is already the biggest star in America. He stopped by to visit Sam Phillips, just to talk, just to breathe the air of the place where everything started 2 years ago. But when Elvis hears the piano, he stops in the doorway. His eyes find Jerry Lee. He watches for a moment, and then he walks in. Sam Phillips sees the look on Elvis's face, that particular stillness, that careful attention, and something in him relaxes. He has been managing big personalities in small rooms for years. He knows what peace looks like, and he knows what trouble looks like. And right now, he isn't entirely sure which one just walked through his door. Jerry Lee Lewis doesn't stop playing when Elvis enters. He doesn't slow down or look up. He keeps going faster, louder, showing off with the particular aggression of a young man who sees a rival and wants the rival to know exactly what he's dealing with. Elvis pulls a chair toward the piano and sits down. He doesn't say anything. He just watches. Carl Perkins, who has been in this business long enough to read rooms, quietly puts his guitar down. Johnny Cash, who stopped by on his way somewhere else, leans against the back wall and doesn't leave. Something is happening. You can feel it the way you feel a change in the weather before the clouds arrive, a pressure shift, subtle and absolute. Jerry Lee finally looks up. "So," he says, voice carrying that easy Louisiana drawl that always sounds like it's laughing at something the rest of the room hasn't caught yet. The king himself comes to pay a visit. Elvis smiles. The smile that millions of fans know, warm, a little crooked, never quite reaching his eyes when something serious is happening underneath. "Just passing through," Elvis says. Jerry Lee grins wider. He runs a scale, right hand only, impossibly fast. "You play piano, Elvis?" It's the tone more than the question. Light, dismissive, the way you'd ask someone if they've ever tried professional boxing when they've clearly never been in a gym. "A little," Elvis says. "A little." Jerry Lee laughs, shakes his head, turns back to the keys. He launches into a boogie run that rattles the walls, his left hand hammering the bass line, while his right hand dances across the treble keys in patterns that most trained pianists couldn't execute at half the speed. Then he stops, abrupt. The silence is sudden and total. He looks at Elvis. "Go on," he says. "Show me your little—" Sam Phillips sets down his coffee. Carl Perkins is very still. Johnny Cash does not move from the back wall. Elvis looks at the piano bench for a moment. Something crosses his face, not anger, not embarrassment, something more private than either of those things. Then he stands up from his chair and walks to the bench, and Jerry Lee slides to the side just enough to make room. The kind of room you make for someone you don't expect to stay long. Elvis sits down. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't look at Jerry Lee. He puts his hands on the keys very quietly, very gently, the opposite of everything Jerry Lee has been doing for the past 40 minutes. And he begins to play. Not boogie-woogie, not rock and roll. Not anything Jerry Lee would have chosen or expected. Something older. Something that comes from a different place entirely. He plays the opening chords of Peace in the Valley. If you have never heard Elvis Presley play gospel piano, you have never heard Elvis Presley. The version of him that the world knows, the jumpsuits, the hip movements, the electric performances that made teenagers lose their minds, that version is the public Elvis, the performer. The product that Colonel Tom Parker has spent years constructing and packaging and selling. But gospel is where Elvis comes from. This freakflux. Gospel is what he heard every Sunday morning of his childhood in the Assembly of God Church in East Tupelo, where the congregation had nothing, no money, no power, no security, and so they gave everything to the music. They sang, like the singing itself was the point. Like the sound was the prayer, and the prayer was the only thing standing between them and the darkness. Elvis learned piano the way everyone in that church learned it, by listening, by feeling, by absorbing something through the walls of the place until it became part of the way he breathed. And now, in this small studio with cigarette smoke hanging in the air and three of the greatest musicians of the 20th century watching him, Elvis plays. Not the way Jerry Lee plays. Not fast, not showy, not designed to impress. He plays with the deep, patient authority of someone who has been having a private conversation with this music for his entire life. His left hand finds the bass notes with an ease that looks effortless and is absolutely not. His right hand builds the melody slowly, letting each note breathe, letting the spaces between the notes mean something. Jerry Lee Lewis stops grinning. It happens gradually. The way understanding happens when it comes from something real, not a sudden revelation, but a slow settling, a rearrangement of what you thought you knew. He watches Elvis's hands. He watches the way Elvis's body shifts slightly over the keys, the way his eyes close after a few bars, the way the music stops being performance and becomes something else. Sam Phillips recognizes the something else immediately. He has been in this room for thousands of hours with hundreds of musicians, and he knows the sound of someone playing from memory versus the sound of someone playing from their life. Elvis is playing from his life. From his mother singing to him in a house so small, the walls pressed in. From Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings, and revival nights when the Spirit came down and ordinary people were suddenly luminous, Elvis moves from Peace in the Valley into Just a Little Talk with Jesus. And the transition is seamless, inevitable, like a river finding its level. His voice comes in quietly, not performing, not projecting, just filling the room the way warmth fills a room, gradually. From the inside out, Johnny Cash pushes off the back wall and takes a step forward. Carl Perkins picks his guitar back up, not to play it, just to hold it. And Jerry Lee Lewis sits very still beside the man he spent 40 minutes trying to diminish, and he listens. Here is something that Jerry Lee Lewis will say much later in his life. When interviewers ask him about that afternoon, he will say it the way people say things that cost them something to admit. He will say, "I thought I knew what Elvis was. I thought he was a singer who got lucky. A pretty face with some moves and a good voice. I didn't know he was a musician, not until that day, not until I heard him play." Elvis plays for nearly 20 minutes. He moves through gospel after gospel songs he has known since childhood, songs that shaped the instrument his voice would become. And the room stays quiet the way a room stays quiet when something irreplaceable is happening, and everyone present understands that without being told. When Elvis finally stops, he lifts his hands from the keys and sets them in his lap, Christ. He doesn't look at Jerry Lee. He looks at the piano for a moment, like he's saying goodbye to something private. Then he looks up. The room is completely silent. Jerry Lee Lewis speaks first. His voice is different from how it was before. The swagger is still there. It is always there. It is bone deep in Jerry Lee Lewis, but something underneath it has shifted. "I didn't know," he says. "I didn't know you played like that." Elvis looks at him. "I don't usually," he says. "Not in front of people." That is the whole conversation. 8 words. 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, he says. But the people in that room will remember it for the rest of their lives, because they understand what is underneath those 8 words, that there is a version of Elvis that the world never gets to see, that the performer everyone knows is real, but he is not the whole truth, that somewhere underneath the legend, there is a boy from Tupelo who learned music in a church with no windows, and that boy can do things with a piano that would break your heart. What happened next is what music historians now call the $1 Million Quartet session. Elvis, Jerry Lee, Carl Perkins, and Johnny Cash, 4 men who would each separately change the history of American music, spent the rest of that afternoon playing together. Gospel, mostly. Country, old songs, the kind of songs that come from the ground. Sam Phillips, hit record. Of course he did. The recordings that exist from that afternoon are unlike anything else in the rock and roll catalog. You can hear it in the sound. 4 men who are not performing. 4 men who are playing for themselves, for the room, for something that has nothing to do with record sales or radio play or anything the Colonel might approve or disapprove of. You can hear Jerry Lee Lewis deferring to Elvis on certain songs, a thing that Jerry Lee Lewis essentially never did, before or after. You can hear the respect in the way he plays underneath instead of over. Years later, when journalists would ask Jerry Lee about that session, he would always give the same answer. He would say, Elvis surprised him, and Jerry Lee Lewis did not surprise easily. The session ran until nearly 7 in the evening. When it ended, when the 4 of them stood up and stretched and reached for their coats, Jerry Lee Lewis did something that nobody who knew him would have predicted. He walked to Elvis, put out his hand, and said, "You play better than I expected, Presley." It was the closest thing to a compliment that Jerry Lee Lewis knew how to offer. Elvis shook his hand. His smile was the real one this time. "You play harder than I expected," he said. They parted ways into the Memphis evening. Jerry Lee back to the apartment he was renting on the south side. Elvis to Graceland, and the world waiting for him beyond it. Carl Perkins and Johnny Cash headed in their own directions. Sam Phillips stayed in the studio for another hour, listening to the playback. He knew he had something. He didn't know yet exactly what. The bootleg recordings of the $1 Million Quartet circulated for decades before they were officially released. When they finally came out, music critics listened for the sound of 4 legends playing together and found something they didn't expect. They found the sound of 4 human beings, young and alive, and not yet knowing what they would become, playing the songs they loved in a small room on a winter afternoon in Memphis. They found the sound of Elvis Presley playing piano, the way he never played piano anywhere else. And if you listen closely, very closely, in the spaces between the songs, where the room is still and the tape is still running, and nobody is performing, you can hear something that might be Jerry Lee Lewis. The great Jerry Lee Lewis, who never admitted he was wrong about anything, humming softly to himself, playing the harmony beneath Elvis's lead, following, for once, instead of leading, and understanding, finally. What he had been too proud to see before he walked into that room and heard 21-year-old Elvis Presley sit down at a piano and play like he had nothing to prove to anyone. Because he didn't. He never had. That's the thing about Elvis, that the world was always slowest to understand. Behind the performance, behind the fame, behind the carefully managed legend, there was a man who had learned everything he knew from people who had nothing, from a church with no windows, from a mother who sang to keep the fear away, from music that was never about being the best in the room. It was about telling the truth. And on December 4th, 1956, in a small recording studio in Memphis, Tennessee, with the cigarette smoke drifting and the coffee going cold and three legends watching in silence, Elvis Aaron Presley sat down at a piano and told the truth. Jerry Lee Lewis never forgot it. Neither should we. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the people we think we know are almost always more than we can see, please subscribe and share it, because the greatest moments in music history didn't happen on the big stage. They happened in small rooms, between people, when nobody was watching. Drop a comment below. Did you know Elvis played gospel piano like this? And what other hidden sides of the legends you love would you want us to uncover? The bell is right there, the notification bell. Ring it, because this is just the beginning.